Hey, it's Drybear. We need to talk about the best tanks in Dragonflight 10.2 Season 3 week number 1. Things have changed quite a bit since the middle of Season 2 and definitely since Season 1, so if you're wondering what the best tank in the game is for Mythic Plus, Heroic Raid, Mythic Raid, you're in the right place. And while there were many balance changes that were made to tanks in Season 2, it seems like we've kind of rubber banded back to a spread that we had early on in Dragonflight, in that there were about 3 or 4 tanks that were clearly better than the bottom 2, and in this case we still have one of those, but the other one might surprise you considering how strong the expansion started for Protection Warrior. But let's dive into the tanks overall. We have them stacked up here: Heroic Raid, Mythic Raid, and Mythic Plus. And the reason I like stacking these together is because all of these are different encounter types. They require different skill sets and different abilities, and many tanks bring a lot of AoE silences like Vengeance Demon Hunter, or maybe they can deal with a lot of AoE damage like Brewmaster, maybe they have tons of self-healing like Blood DK, or maybe they have lots of self-control like Protection Paladin, or maybe they're a bear, or maybe they have tons of AoE and damage reduction like Protection Warrior. And I joke, of course, Guardian Druids do have tons of group healing, and they do have some really nice single target damage output if they spec for it. Now keep in mind that there's only 3.5 days worth of data, or 4 days worth of data on the Mythic Raid. Now it's going to be a little bit weird to have this included right now, but I think it is worthwhile because we can see what the world first groups are running and how well those tanks are performing in that group. And luckily we've already seen a bunch of guilds get to 6 out of 9 progress, 7 out of 9 progress, and they're able to get a lot of logs online so we can see how the tanks are doing. Now when you put everything together, Mythic Plus, Mythic Raid, Heroic Raid, Vengeance Demon Hunter takes the top by a small margin. Now this is something that we see a lot in Mythic Raid specifically. A ton of the Vengeance Demon Hunters are being run, and they're being run to insane efficacy. In fact, it's probably the #1 tank right now in very difficult content is going to be the Vengeance Demon Hunter. Inside of Heroic Raid or Mythic Plus, if you're at moderate difficulty, you know, +15s, +10s, or just Heroic Raid, normal raid, Brewmaster is actually the best tank overall performing, but when it comes down to it and you need the highest difficulty with the highest damage output, Vengeance Demon Hunter is just wiping the floor right now. And the dungeons that we have currently for this season of Mythic Plus isn't really too bad in requirements. You definitely need a lot of interrupts, which all the melee tanks, all the tanks can do. You need some nice silences or CCs depending on the affix, but there's nothing that's like really out there that one tank is going to do significantly better than every other, which we have had in some seasons. Now, if you can immune the boss effects in Blackrook Hold, like Protection Warrior or Protection Paladin, or if you can kite some of the dangerous mobs in like Everbloom or Darkheart Thicket like Vengeance Demon Hunter or Brewmaster Monk, or you can get through some of the anti-healing mechanics and magic mechanics with Blood DK in Throne of the Tides. But from where I'm sitting right now, Protection Paladin, Blood DK, Brewmaster Monk, and Vengeance Demon Hunter are all in an excellent spot and are about the same unless you're talking about race to world force push. I really like where Protection Paladin is this season right now, and they're doing a much better job than they were before, and I think overall they're less cooldown reliant than they were in previous seasons. For me, the biggest outliers right now are going to be Guardian Druid and Protection Warrior in just general performance. Protection Warrior actually coming in last place for Mythic Plus, which is kind of a shocker. They've been the king or queen of Mythic Plus for a very long time, all throughout the expansion, really insanely strong. They got a bunch of nerfs, and all the classes got a bunch of buffs, and things have kind of been shifting around, but they're actually at the lowest performance for Mythic Plus this week in week 1. Right behind them in Mythic Plus is the Guardian Druid, the Bear Druid, and I think they're still in a very struggle bus spot. I'm not sure what's going on at Blizzard this year, but Dragonflight has not been the best expansion when it comes to Bear Druids. They've reworked a lot of the talent tree, worked around a lot of the abilities and different talents you can get, deciding whether they want to go self-healing or they want Maul and AoE or arcane damage coming out from them. But in general, it seems they've really struggled to find a home, even though they do have a lot going for them. Of the next grouping with the 4 other tanks, Protection Paladin is definitely at the lower end of that. Some of that has to do with mobility, some of that has to do with the spreading of their cooldowns that they can use, whereas things like Brewmaster, Vengeance Demon Hunter, and even Blood DK can stagger their cooldowns a lot more effectively based on the timers and how powerful they are. But if you're on Protection Paladin and your wings are down or your Sentinel is down and you're really kind of not having the cooldowns that you need, Protection Paladin definitely struggles a bit in those really desperate moments. But I think you would expect to see this in week 1. We just did a video going over the DPS rankings. You'll find that on my channel as well. So if you're looking at that, there was kind of the same setup in that most of the classes were pretty close together. There were a couple outliers for the beginning, and there are some that are really lagging behind. So hopefully after Blizzard gets a bunch of data on the first week of Mythic Plus, that they're able to come back and say, okay, can we do something to help out these tanks that might be falling a little bit behind their counterparts in most of the encounters they're finding. Another cool aspect to pay attention to is the race to world first in the Amir Drasil raid is going on right now. So you can see how the tanks are being played. Now, in general, when it comes to raid tanks in the Race to World First, usually you just have 2 really strong players, and many people have come on record to say that they like having their most technical players play in DPS or healer because tank is just very straightforward, but you do like to see what specs they're running, what combination of tanks they're running, and also if they end up swapping tanks for specific fights for different reasons, you might be able to spot that on the Race to World First as well. So if you want to catch up on this and you haven't watched the Race to World First before, check that out. I'll put that down in the description and in the comments for you for different resources that you can use to watch. Now, I'll give the same spiel that I give every time with these DP or these tank tier lists, is that usually if you play well and you play smart, you can play any tank in the game. Just because Guardian Druid or the Protection Warrior are lower on the list, it doesn't mean that you're doing your friends a disservice by playing those. And in most cases, if you're just talking about 15 plus keys and below, or you're just talking about heroic raids or AOTC, it doesn't really matter which tank you pick. They're all basically the same in that regard. But as soon as you start pushing to plus 20 and above for Mythic Plus, plus 25, and you start doing Mythic raids, especially in the first month, then the tank choice starts to matter a lot more. And in that case, there are 2 tanks that stand out as being a little bit less viable than the others, and you're going to struggle a little bit more if you decide to play them. But that's where we're at for Season 3, Week 1 for tanks in Dragonflight. What did you think about this? Let me know down in the comments what tank you're expecting to be higher up on the list or lower on the list, or which class you think needs a buff the most. If you found value in today's video, leave a like down below, leave a comment for the algorithm to help this video get seen by more people, and don't forget to check out my other channels for other content and other stuff and other things.